Hello, guys, gals, and those who have transcended the gender binary. A pillar here once again with a great, lovely pillow talk, this time about geopolitics. The fact of the matter is, Russia and Putin, as both a country and a person, are very likely screwed right now in the war with Ukraine. So, you may be wondering to yourself, Pillow, what are you talking about? What do you mean Russia's screwed? Well, quite frankly, they aren't doing so well in this war against Ukraine. To those of you who have been sleeping under just the largest rock for the past couple of months, Russia recently very unrightfully invaded Ukraine, and no one really expected Ukraine to do so well in the war. But Ukraine has not only done well in this war, they've exceeded expectations and have essentially put Russia on the ropes, militarily, morale wise, etc. As a country, Russia has been buckling under massive protests in their major cities. They have lost top generals, they've lost hundreds of thousands of troops, and recently the dictator of Russia, Vladimir Putin, has put in a partial mobilization of largely untrained armed forces in Russia just to stem the bleeding that Russia has been doing into the country. This partial mobilization would entail going into Russia's reserves, which, unlike reserves in the United States of America, where they are largely people who are still up to snuff, and while maybe not being as good as active duty members, can very easily be retrained and put into jobs and do just as well as them, Russian reserves aren't necessarily like that. As well as this, Russia is currently not permitting many men to leave the country due to this partial mobilization. I believe it goes up from the ages of 18 to 65-year-old men cannot currently leave the country, which says a lot. If they're not letting 65-year-old men leave the country, they are potentially gonna have to start drafting people to engage in this war in Ukraine. Now, I'm just gonna go ahead and say this outright. It doesn't look like Russia's gonna win this war, nor does it look like Ukraine is necessarily gonna push into Russia as a country. The fact of the matter is, this war between Russia and Ukraine, at least on the Ukrainian side, has largely been a war of protecting the national interest, of protecting the nation, of engaging in just massive defense against a massive neighbor who is assailing upon them. I don't necessarily believe that Ukraine is going to push this war into Russia. The most that they might do is push it into Crimea, which is currently Russian controlled, but part of Ukraine. By technicality, it is Russian because it has been annexed by technicality, but many nations on this planet don't recognize it. I don't personally recognize it, so we're just going to say that they have not been annexed and they are a part of Ukraine. So really, let's be honest, they aren't going to be pushing into Russia anytime soon, the Ukrainian military, because again, this has largely been a war of defense, and they've been doing pretty good at it. Now, let's talk about this from the Russian side. First of all, morale is not looking too hot in Russia. There have been massive protests in many cities, and they have felt the economic strapping in the country. As well as this, plane tickets out of Russia after the partial mobilization was announced skyrocketed to very high prices, sometimes in the thousands of dollars in American dollars, which is already hard enough to come by in a normal circumstance, but whenever your country has been racked by economic sanctions, also whenever you can't necessarily go to most normal European countries that you would think of, I believe many people actually have to route themselves through the United Arab Emirates to even be able to get to other countries if they want to travel by plane, just due to the fact that Russian nationals aren't really allowed into other European countries. They aren't looking too hot if the plane tickets have skyrocketed that much out of the country, because people don't want to stay there, they want to flee. As well as this, you've actually had top Russian officials and Putin loyalists actively stating the fact that they don't necessarily believe that this war is going all that hot for them, which openly questioning a dictator is not the safest move unless you genuinely think that other people in the nation might have your back. Now, I'm not saying that Putin's going to be a subject to a coup anytime soon. I doubt that that is going to happen anytime soon. But it's looking more and more likely by the day that we might wake up one day to see Swan Lake playing on the TV and to see that Putin has been shunted out of office unceremoniously and replaced with some oligarch somewhere. Generally, it doesn't seem like the war plan has been going well for Russia in any sense of the term. No one wants to be in Russia right now, and no one wants to stay in Russia right now. People are actively fleeing Russia right now, and they've hemorrhaged so many troops in this aggressive war that they're going to have to mobilize people who are barely trained to be in a war. And this has largely all been for nothing. This is largely a war of just flat-out aggression. There is no defense going on. The most that you can say is that Russia was trying to discourage other nations from joining NATO and into entering their own sphere of influence. But the fact of the matter is, they failed at that. Because NATO nations have been defending Ukraine with armaments, with sending them aid, etc., other nations have realized the fact that not being in NATO is probably a bad thing, and they should probably go ahead and join NATO before Russia tries to do the same thing to them, while they might be not as strapped to deal with it. Because, of course, attacking a NATO member state is immediately declaring war on all NATO member states, and Russia doesn't want to risk that as a kind of thing to do. The reason why they entered Ukraine is because Ukraine isn't a part of NATO, but I guarantee you, after Ukraine beats back Russia, they'll very likely join NATO, because Russia's failed at its largest goal in this, which was stopping Ukraine from joining NATO. As well as this, the Russian notion of denazifying Ukraine hasn't worked at all, because of course Ukraine isn't crawling with Nazis, believe it or not. Hey, the Gorel Institute would make you believe otherwise. I am still very salty about that one video they put out. That was horrible. Basically, in short, Russia donked up. They really don't have anything else to do except for, well, really surrender. And they aren't likely to do that, because if you surrender, it kind of proves that you failed as a leader, and that's the last thing that a dictator wants to do. I don't believe that Putin is going to be couped in the next month or so, but I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the line Putin is displaced in a way. I don't think any Russian oligarchs necessarily want to engage in the replacement of Putin as of yet, because there would be a lot of infighting if that were to happen. It would be like a collapse of the Soviet Union all again, people fighting for power. But at the same time, I don't think that Putin's staying there in goodwill anymore. People have lost money. This war has been nothing but ruinous for the Russian economy. The Russian people aren't very much fans of it, as it seems. They're just not successful. It's been a horrible war. Putin wanted to be the next imperialist, he wanted to be the next unifier of Russia, and he's failed invariably, because no one cares. Ukraine isn't a part of Russia. It's an independent nation, and it seems like they always will remain that. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, hit that bell icon down below. I love you all so much. Also, make sure to comment, it helps me in the algorithm if I haven't said that already. Also, share with someone who you think might like this or not. You can follow me at twitter.com in the description. It is right there. Feel free to DM me there. I will accept all DMs. I am willing to talk, or have a debate, or just ask me a question. Anything like that. With that being said, I love you all, and I hope you have a good night. Goodbye. Or day, whenever this finds you.